The Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896 is an event that, despite its brevity, left an indelible mark on history. Lasting only 38 minutes, it holds the distinction of being the shortest recorded war in history. This conflict, which took place on August 27, 1896, between the United Kingdom and the Sultanate of Zanzibar, was the culmination of political tensions, imperial rivalries, and colonial ambition. Zanzibar, located off the east coast of Africa, was a vital hub in the Indian Ocean trade, and its strategic position had made it a significant player in the region. By the late 19th century, Zanzibar was a British protectorate, with the British exerting significant influence over the island's affairs. However, the sultans of Zanzibar, particularly Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini, maintained a certain degree of autonomy, much to the displeasure of the British government, which sought greater control. The origins of the Anglo-Zanzibar War can be traced back to the death of Sultan Hamad bin Thuwaini on August 25, 1896. Sultan Hamad had been a British ally, and his death created a power vacuum on the island. The British had strong preferences for who should succeed him, particularly favoring Hamad's cousin, Sultan Hamoud bin Mohammed, who was seen as more sympathetic to British interests. However, the new sultan was not the only claimant to the throne. A rival faction led by Khalid bin Barghash, the son of a former sultan, took advantage of the political instability to seize power. Khalid's actions were seen as a direct challenge to British influence, and the British were determined to prevent him from consolidating power. Khalid bin Barghash was not without his supporters, and upon hearing of Sultan Hamad's death, he quickly moved to secure the palace and assumed the role of sultan. The British, seeing this as an affront to their authority, immediately set to work on forcing Khalid's abdication. They issued an ultimatum demanding that Khalid step down and leave the palace by on August 27, 1896. Khalid refused to comply, and by the time the deadline passed, tensions had escalated to the point of open conflict. The British had already prepared for the possibility of a confrontation, and they had a considerable military advantage over the Zanzibari forces. The British forces in the region were well equipped, and they brought a small fleet of warships, including the HMS Steady George, HMS Raccoon, and HMS Thrush, to bear upon the Zanzibari palace. These ships were equipped with heavy artillery, and they had orders to destroy the palace and any military installations that might support Khalid's forces. In addition to their naval strength, the British had a contingent of Marines, armed with rifles, ready to land on the island if needed. On the other hand, the Zanzibari forces, led by Khalid, had a much smaller and less advanced military. They relied on a combination of local militia, artillery, and a small navy of their own, which included a few old cannons and a few ships. Despite their best efforts, the Zanzibari forces were no match for the firepower that the British brought to bear. At 9:02 am on August 27, the British began their bombardment of the palace. The initial salvo was devastating, and it quickly became clear that the Zanzibari forces were outmatched. The palace was struck by heavy artillery fire, and it began to collapse. Meanwhile, the British warships targeted the Zanzibari military positions, including their naval vessels, which were quickly sunk or disabled. Within minutes, the royal palace was in ruins, and most of the Zanzibari forces were either dead, wounded, or in retreat. The entire exchange was so swift that the British did not even need to deploy their Marines. By 9:40 am, less than 40 minutes after the bombardment had begun, the fighting had stopped. Khalid bin Barghash had fled the palace, seeking refuge in the German consulate, and the British had effectively won the war. The aftermath of the Anglo-Zanzibar War was a clear demonstration of British military dominance. The short duration of the conflict meant that few lives were lost compared to other wars, but it still had significant consequences for the island of Zanzibar. Sultan Khalid's forces were decisively defeated, and British-backed Sultan Hamoud bin Mohammed was installed as the new ruler. The British made it clear that they would continue to exert their influence over Zanzibar, further cementing their colonial control. Despite the relatively low number of casualties on both sides, around 500 Zanzibari soldiers and civilians were killed. compared to just one British sailor, the impact of the war was far-reaching. Zanzibar remained under British control until 1963, when it gained independence, but the legacy of British colonial rule continued to shape the island's history for decades to come. The Anglo-Zanzibar War remains a fascinating episode in the annals of military history. While it may be overshadowed by other more prolonged and bloody conflicts, it serves as a striking reminder of the imperial ambitions of the 19th century and the stark power imbalances that often characterize colonial encounters. The war also reflects the role that military technology played in shaping the outcomes of conflicts during this era. The overwhelming firepower of the British warships ensured a quick victory, highlighting the importance of naval superiority and modern weaponry in shaping the course of global events. Despite its brevity, the Anglo-Zanzibar War had lasting cultural and political ramifications for Zanzibar. The conflict marked the end of an era of relative independence for the Sultanate and the beginning of a new chapter in the island's colonial history. The British installed Sultan Hamud, who was more compliant with their wishes, and effectively turned Zanzibar into a puppet state. Under British control, Zanzibar saw the further consolidation of British power in East Africa, as well as the growth of the global trade network that would benefit European colonial powers. However, the war also marked a turning point in the history of the region, as the people of Zanzibar and East Africa began to experience the full force of European imperialism. In the years following the war, anti-colonial movements began to grow in Zanzibar, eventually leading to the island's independence and the end of British rule in the 20th century. The Anglo-Zanzibar War is a unique historical event, both for its brevity and its significance. It is a reminder of the complexities of colonialism and the sometimes absurd extremes to which imperial powers would go to assert their dominance. While it is easy to dismiss the war as a mere curiosity due to its short duration, its implications for the people of Zanzibar and the broader African continent were profound. It is also an illustration of how history is often shaped by events that are overlooked or forgotten, even when they have a significant impact on the course of global affairs. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, though brief, is a testament to the power dynamics of the late 19th century and a fascinating chapter in the history of British colonialism. As we look back on this extraordinary conflict, we are reminded that sometimes the most significant moments in history are those that happen in the blink of an eye. If you found this glimpse into history captivating, hit that subscribe button and share the journey with others. Keep your curiosity alive. More incredible stories are coming your way.